3 weeks passed after Daniel and Grace began their relationship. To everyone in church, they were the perfect couple. They prayed together after every services, attended Bible study side by side as though they were married, and volunteered during outreach programs. Whenever Grace smiled, Daniel felt as though he had found answer to years of prayer. Yet, behind that smile, Grace was slowly falling apart. Every morning she woke up with the same fear. What if today is the day everything falls apart? One Saturday afternoon, Daniel invited Grace to his parents' home. His mother, Mrs. Johnson, welcomed her warmly. So this is the beautiful young lady who has stolen my son's heart. Grace blushed. I'm pleased to meet you, ma. Daniel's father took her hand with a smile. My son has spoken highly of you. Lunch was filled with laughter. Daniel's younger sister teased him constantly. So when is the wedding? Everyone laughed, except Grace. She forced a smile, but her heart tightened. She felt as though she didn't deserve the love she was receiving. That evening, Daniel drove Grace home. As they reached her apartment, he turned off the engine. I've never been this happy before. Grace looked at him. I mean it. Daniel continued. Every day I spent with you convinced me more that God brought you into my life. Grace's eye became misty. Daniel noticed. Why are you crying? She quickly wiped away the tears. I'm just overwhelmed. He gently held her hand. Whatever is bothering you, you can tell me. Grace wanted to. More than anything, she wanted to. But before she could speak, her phone rang. Her face instantly changed. She stared at the screen without answering. Daniel noticed. Aren't you going to pick it up? It's not important. Grace stuttered. The phone stopped ringing. A second later, message appeared. Grace quickly slipped the phone into her handbag. Daniel didn't ask her any more questions. Back inside her apartment, Grace locked the door behind her and leaned against it. Her hands trembled as she opened the message. You ignore my calls again. Tomorrow 5 p.m. Don't make me come looking for you. There was no signature. She didn't need one. She already knew who sent it. Vanessa. The next evening, Grace arrived at a quiet cafe on the edge of the town. She looked around nervously. Vanessa was already seated in the corner. She wore dark sunglasses despite the fading evening sunlight. You finally came, Vanessa said. I told you never to contact me again. Vanessa smiled faintly. I don't think you are in position to give me orders. Grace said, what do you want? I need money. I don't have that kind of money. You will. Grace shook her head. I've tried to leave all this behind. You don't get to decide that. Vanessa leaned closer. Do you think your church knows who you used to be? Grace remained silent. Do you think Daniel knows? Grace's breath quickened. What exactly do you want? Grace asked. Vanessa slid a small envelope across the table. Grace opened it. Inside were old photographs from years ago. Her face turned pale. No. I kept them. You promised you'd destroy everything. I lied. Grace closed the envelope immediately. What if Daniel sees this? Your perfect little life disappeared overnight. Tears gathered in Grace's eyes. Please. Vanessa's voice remained calm. By the end of the week, I want 10 million naira. I don't have that. Then find it. And if I don't, Vanessa stood, then everyone, including Daniel, will learn what happened all those years ago. She walked away without looking back. Grace remained frozen in her chair. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She took the envelope from her handbag and stared at it. She remembered the day everything changed years earlier. A frightening teenager, a trusted adult, a terrible decision, a promise to keep quiet. She shut her eyes tightly. I can't keep running forever. The following Wednesday, Pastor Samuel noticed Grace sitting alone after Bible study. He walked over quietly. My daughter. Grace stood respectfully. Good evening, Pastor. You've looked troubled these past few weeks. I'm all right, sir. Pastor Samuel smiled gently. Sometimes, I'm all right is the sentence people use when they are hurting the most. Grace lowered her head. If there is something weighing on your heart, don't carry it alone. Eyes filled with tears. There are things I've never told anyone. Pastor Samuel nodded. The truth can be frightening. He paused. But secrets often grow heavier with time. Grace almost spoke. She almost told him everything. Instead, she whispered, I'm afraid. Pastor Samuel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Fear loses its power when brought into the light. Meanwhile, Daniel began to notice the change. Grace no longer laughed as freely. She often seemed distracted. She checked over her shoulder whenever they walked together. When her phone rang, she would immediately silence it. Daniel wanted to ask questions, but love kept telling him to trust her. Still, a quiet voice in the back of his mind whispered that something was terribly wrong. He simply didn't know what. Late that Friday, Daniel stopped by Grace's house with flowers. He hoped to surprise her. When he knocked, there was no answer. He called her phone, no response. As he turned to leave, he noticed a black SUV parked across the street. A woman stepped out. She looked towards Grace's apartment before driving away. Daniel froze. He had never seen her before. He looked once more at the closed apartment door, then at the disappearing vehicle. For the first time since meeting Grace, a question entered his heart. Who was that woman? The question stayed with Daniel all night. Who was that woman in that black SUV? He had driven home with the bucket of flowers still lying on the passenger seat. He had intended to surprise Grace, but instead, he found himself wrestling with a strange feeling he had never experienced before. It wasn't jealousy, it was worry. Grace wasn't the type of a woman who lied. At least, that was what he believed. Yet something about the way she had changed over the past few weeks told him he was carrying a burden she refused to share. He knelt beside his bed. Lord, he prayed softly, if Grace is in trouble, help me to help her. And if there is something I need to know, please reveal it in your own time. The following Sunday, Grace arrived at church looking exhausted. She had barely slept. A dark circle had begun to form beneath her eyes, and despite the smile she wore, anyone who looked closely could tell she was struggling. Daniel met her at the entrance. You don't look well. I'm just tired. You've been saying that for weeks. Grace forced a smile. I will be fine. Daniel gently squeezed her hand. You know you can tell me anything, right? For a moment, Grace looked into his eyes. She saw nothing but sincerity. Her heart broke. I know, she whispered. After the service, Pastor Samuel preached a short message titled The Freedom of Truth. He spoke about how hidden burdens could slowly destroy a person's peace. The enemy, he said, often used to keep people silent. But healing begins when truth is spoken. Grace lowered her head. Every sentence felt as though it had been prepared especially for her. She fought back tears. Daniel noticed. He quickly handed her a handkerchief. She smiled gracefully. Later that week, Daniel invited Grace to a quiet park overlooking a small lake. Children laughed as they chased one another across the grass. An elderly couple walked hand in hand nearby. Daniel spread a small picnic blanket beneath a tree. I made your favorite jollof rice, he said proudly. Grace laughed for the first time in days. You cooked? I watched 3 cooking videos before attempting it. She tasted a spoonful. It's actually good. I will take that as a compliment. They laughed together. For a moment, why? All of Grace's worries disappeared. Daniel looked at her carefully. This is the smile I've been missing. Grace looked away. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize. I feel like I've been disappointing you. Daniel shook his head. You've never disappointed me. His word pierced her heart. She silently wondered whether he would still say the same thing if he knew everything. That evening, as Grace returned home, she found an envelope slipped beneath her apartment door. Her hands trembled before she even picked it up. Inside was a single photograph. It was an old photo from years ago. She recognized the place immediately, the abandoned house, the day her life changed forever. Attached to the photograph was another notice. 3 days, don't test my patience. No name, no signature. Grace didn't need one. She sank onto the floor, clutching the picture to her hands. The next morning, she received another call. This time, she answered. What do you want from me? Grace asked. Vanessa's voice remained calm. You ignore my deadline. I told you I don't have that kind of money. You have someone who does. Grace froze. What are you talking about? Your boyfriend? No. He seems successful. I'm not asking him for anything. Then prepare yourself for the consequences. The line went dead. Grace immediately burst into tears. Across town, Daniel was meeting with his architect friend, Tunde. They discussed a housing project for almost an hour before Tunde suddenly asked, How is Grace? Daniel smiled. She's wonderful, but... He paused. Then continued. Daniel looked surprised. What makes you think there is a but? You've been distracted all morning. Daniel sighed. I think she's hiding something. Tunde leaned forward. Do you think she's seen as someone else? Daniel immediately shook his head. No, Grace isn't that type of person. Then what do you think it is? I honestly don't know. For the first time, Daniel admitted something that was frightening him. I'm afraid she's carrying a problem she thinks she has to face alone. That night, Grace made a decision she couldn't allow Daniel to become part of Vanessa's threats. The next evening, she sent Daniel a message. Can we meet tomorrow after work? There's something important I need to tell you. Daniel smiled as he read it. Finally, whatever had been troubling Grace was coming to an end. He replied immediately. Of course, I will be there. The following afternoon, Daniel arrived at the cafe 30 minutes earlier. He ordered 2 cups of coffee. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. Grace never came. Instead, his phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. He answered and said, Hello. A woman's voice spoke gently. If I were you, Daniel froze. Who is this? I'd stopped asking Grace so many questions. The call ended. Daniel stared at his phone in confusion. His heartbeat quickened. Who knew he was meeting Grace? And why would a stranger want him to stay away? Meanwhile, Grace sat inside a movie vehicle. She had never made it to the cafe. On her way there, a black SUV had pulled up beside her. Vanessa stepped out. You need to come with me. I told you I'm meeting someone. Vanessa's expression hardened. No, you are meeting me. Grace hesitated. Vanessa held up another envelope. You know what's inside. Grace's face drained of color. Without another word, she got into the vehicle. As the SUV drove away, Grace looked out of the window with tears in her eyes. She whispered almost silently, I'm sorry, Daniel, unaware that At that very moment, Daniel was standing outside the cafe wondering why the woman he loved had vanished without a trace. Daniel did not sleep that night. He sat in his living room with his phone in his hand, staring at Grace's last message. Can we meet tomorrow after work? There's something important I need to tell you. She had been the one who requested the meeting. She had sounded serious, yet she never arrived. Instead, a strange woman had called him and warned him to stop asking questions. None of it made sense. Daniel dialed Grace's number again, switched off. He tried again. The same response. His heart became heavier. This isn't like her, he whispered. The next morning, Grace arrived at the hospital where she worked. She looked exhausted. One of the nurses, Esther, walked over to her. Grace, are you alright? Grace forced a smile. I'm fine. No, you are not. I just didn't sleep well. Esther looked unconvinced, but decided not to press on. Throughout the day, Grace struggled to concentrate. She nearly gave a patient the wrong medication before another nurse corrected her. After her shift, she sat alone in the staff room. She opened her handbag. Inside was another envelope Vanessa had forced into her hand the previous evening. She slowly unfolded the letter. This is your final warning. If you don't do exactly what I asked, Daniel will receive everything. The photographs, the recordings, every secret from that night. Grace covered her face with both hands. She could no longer breathe normal. Across town, Daniel made up his mind. He was done waiting. If Grace wouldn't tell him what was happening, he would find out himself. He wasn't trying to invade her privacy. He simply wanted to protect the woman he loved. His first stop was the church. Pastor Samuel welcomed him warmly. Daniel, it's good to see you. Good afternoon, Pastor. You seem troubled. Daniel nodded. I don't know what's happening to Grace. Pastor Samuel's expression changed. What do you mean? Daniel explained everything. The missed meeting, the strange phone call, Grace's recent behavior, the mysterious woman in the black SUV. Pastor Samuel listened carefully without interrupting. When Daniel finished speaking, the pastor sighed deeply. I've noticed that Grace has been carrying a heavy burden. Do you know what it is? Pastor Samuel slowly shook his head. No. Has she ever spoken to you? Only enough for me to know that she's afraid. Daniel lowered his head. I just wanted to help her. Pastor Samuel rested a hand on his shoulder. Then don't stop praying for her. Later that evening, Daniel decided to visit Grace's apartment again. This time, she was home. She opened the door slowly. Her eyes widened. Daniel. He smiled gently. I've been worried. Grace looked as though she had been crying. I'm sorry about yesterday. What happened? Grace hesitated. He stuttered. Before she could continue, her phone vibrated. She immediately silenced it. Daniel noticed. Grace. She looked away. Who keep calling you? No one, she quickly replied. Please don't lie to me. Tears gathered in her eyes. I'm trying to protect you. Daniel frowned. Protect me from what? Grace couldn't answer. Instead, she whispered. Please, just trust me a little longer. Daniel looked into her tear-filled eyes. Everything inside him wanted to keep asking questions. Instead, he quietly nodded. I trust you. Grace bursted into tears. She threw her arms around him. I'm so sorry. Daniel hugged her tightly. He had no idea why she was apologizing. As Daniel walked back to his car, he noticed something unusual. Across the street, the same black SUV, parked beneath a large mango tree. Its windows were tinted. The engine was running. Someone was watching. The moment Daniel looked toward it, the vehicle slowly drove away. Daniel quickly entered his own car. For the first time, he decided to follow it. The SUV drove through several busy streets before turning into an old part of town. Daniel stayed several cars behind. Finally, the vehicle stopped outside a run-down duplex. A woman stepped out. Daniel recognized her immediately. She was the same woman he had seen outside Grace's apartment weeks earlier. He watched as she entered the building. Daniel remained inside his car. He looked around. The neighborhood was unusually quiet. Just then, his phone rang. It was Grace. He answered immediately. Grace. Daniel, where are you? I'm out. You sounded different. Daniel hesitated. I'm all right. There was silence. Then Grace spoke softly. Please promise me something. What is it? If anything happened, Daniel interrupted. Nothing is going to happen. You don't know that, Grace. I never wanted any of this. The line suddenly went dead. Daniel immediately tried calling back. Her phone was switched off again. He looked toward the old duplex. The front door slowly opened. The woman stepped outside. She looked directly towards Daniel's car. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then she smiled, a slow, confident, almost frightening smile. Before calmly getting into the SUV and driving away, Daniel's heart pounded. Who was she? How did she know he was there? Meanwhile, inside the apartment, Grace sat on the floor with tears streaming down her face. She opened an old wooden box she had hidden beneath her bed. Inside were newspapers clipped, a faded photograph, a small silver necklace, a handwriting diary. She turned to the very first page. Written in her own handwriting were the words, "The truth has a way of finding us, no matter how deeply we bury it." Grace closed the diary. She made her decision. Tomorrow, she would tell Daniel everything. No more lies, no more fear, no more running. She picked the phone and typed a message. "Daniel, please come to my apartment tomorrow evening. I can't hide this anymore. You deserve to know the truth." Daniel read the message while sitting in his car. Relief washed over him. Finally, the answer were coming. He replied immediately, "I will be there. No matter what it is, we will face it together." Grace smiled through her tears. For the first time in many months, she felt hope. She had no idea that someone else had already made a movie. Outside her apartment building, hidden in the darkness, a figure watched her bedroom window. The person slowly removed a phone and whispered, "So you finally decided to tell him." A cold smile spread across the stranger's face. "You are too late." The figure disappeared into the night. Unaware that the following evening would change Daniel and Grace's lives forever. The entire day, Daniel could not concentrate at work. Grace's message kept replying in his mind. "I can't hide this anymore. You deserve to know the truth." He had imagined many possibilities. Perhaps she was seriously ill. Perhaps she owes someone money. Perhaps someone was threatening her family. Whatever it was, he had already made up his mind. He loved Grace. He would stand by her. As evening approached, Daniel bought a bucket of white roses. Before driving to Grace's apartment, he smiled to himself. Whatever the secret is, he thought, would overcome it. Little did he know that someone else had arrived before him. Inside the apartment, Grace sat on the edge of her bed. The old diary, faded photograph, and silver necklace lay on the bedside table. Her hand trembled. For years she had buried the truth, not because she was guilty of the crime, but because she had been ashamed. Ashamed that she had allowed fear to control her life. A knock came at the door. She stood. Daniel. She opened it. Instead, Vanessa walked in. Grace's face dried of color. "I told you never to come here." Vanessa calmly closed the door behind her. "You've become difficult to find. You need to leave." "I don't think so." Grace stepped backward. "What do you want now?" Vanessa slowly placed a brown envelope on the dining table. "This is the last copy." Grace stared at it. "You've said that before. This time, I mean it. What will it take for you to leave me alone?" Vanessa folded her arms. "I warned you years ago. I was a frightened teenager. You still help cover it up." Grace closed her eyes. The memories flooded back. Years earlier, Grace had only been 16. She lived with her widowed mother in a quiet neighborhood. Next door lived Auntie Evelyn. Everyone admired Auntie Evelyn. She was gorgeous. She bought gifts for children. She often offered to help parents by watching their children after school. No one knew the kind of influence she had behind closed doors. Grace trusted her completely. One rainy evening, Auntie Evelyn persuaded Grace to accompany her to an abandoned building, claiming she needed help collecting some stored belongings. Instead, Grace witnessed a violent confrontation between Auntie Evelyn and another woman over money. The argument turned physical. The woman felt struck, her head against a concrete step, and lost consciousness. Panicking, Auntie Evelyn convinced the terrified teenager to help move the woman before calling for help. "You saw nothing," Auntie Evelyn had whispered. "If anyone finds out, they will blame you too." Grace believed her. For years, she carried the guilt of that terrible night. Unknown to Grace, Vanessa had secretly taken photos of the scene from a distance. She later discovered that the frightening teenager would do almost anything to keep the incident buried. The photograph became a weapon. Whenever Grace tried to move forward with her life, Vanessa demanded money. More silence, more control. Back in the present, Grace looked at Vanessa. "I've given you everything I had." Vanessa shrugged. "And now you are getting married. I love Daniel." "Then tell him the truth." "I was going to." Vanessa laughed. "No, you were going to tell him your vision." She tapped the envelope. "I will tell him mine." Just then, another knock echoed through the apartment. Grace froze. "Daniel," Vanessa smiled. Perfect timing. Grace rushed towards the door. Before she could open it, Vanessa spoke gently. "If you don't want him to see those photographs," Grace talked. She turned slowly. For the first time in years, she realized something. She was tired of being afraid. Very tired. She looked Vanessa straight in the eyes. "No." Vanessa frowned. "No, I'm done running." Grace opened the front door. Daniel stood there holding the bucket of flowers. The smile on his face faded the moment he saw Grace's swollen face. "What happened?" Grace stepped aside. "Come in." Daniel entered. He noticed Vanessa immediately. Neither of them spoke. Grace walked to the table. He picked up the brown envelope. Then he handed it to Daniel. "Everything you need to know is in this." Daniel slowly opened it. Old photographs, copies of anonymous message, bank transfer receipts, later demanding money. He looked at Grace. She began to cry. "I'm sorry." Daniel listened silently as Grace told him everything. From the beginning, she spoke about Auntie Evelyn, the abandoned building, years of fear, the blackmail, the money she had secretly paid, the reason she became distant, the reason she cancelled meeting, the reason she kept saying she wanted to tell him. When she finally finished, the room became silent. Daniel looked at Vanessa. "So you've been threatening her all these years?" Vanessa folded her arms. "I simply protect myself." Daniel picked up his phone. "I'm calling the police." Vanessa laughed. Wickedly. "You have no proof." Grace wiped away her tears. Actually, she reached beneath the sofa and picked up a small digital voice record. Vanessa's small disappeared. Grace looked at her calmly. You've confessed almost everything since you walked in. Vanessa's face turned pale. You recorded me? Grace nodded. I knew you wouldn't stop until someone had the truth. At that moment, another knock sounded. This time it was Pastor Samuel, accompanied by two police officers. Grace had called the pastor earlier that afternoon, asking him to come if she did not answer his evening check-in call. When she failed to answer, he became concerned and contacted the authorities. The officer listened to the voice record. They collected the photographs, letters, and messages. Vanessa tried to explain herself, but the evidence was overwhelming. She was escorted from the apartment. As she reached the door, she turned towards Grace. This isn't over. One of the officers replied firmly, It is now. The door closed behind them. The apartment felt quiet. Grace sank into the chair. I don't expect you to forgive me. Daniel sat opposite her. I'm hurt. Grace lowered her head. I know. I'm hurt because you carried this alone. Tears rolled down Grace's cheek. I thought you'd leave. Daniel sighed. You should have trusted me enough to tell me this before today. I know. I can't pretend this didn't affect us. Grace nodded silently. But I also see someone who has been living in fear for years. Pastor Samuel smiled gently. The truth has finally come into the light. Grace looked at Daniel. I don't know what happened now. Daniel reached across the table and took her trembling hand. What happened next? He said quietly. Is that we stop building our future on fear. Grace cried harder than she ever had before. Not because everything had been fixed, but because for the first time in years, she was free. Months later, the investigation into the old incident concluded. Witnesses came forward. Records confirmed that Grace had been manipulated as a frightened teenager and later blackmailed into silence. The responsibility fell on those who had exploited her fear. Grace no longer lived under the weight of threats. She and Daniel continued counseling with Pastor Samuel. Trust took time to rebuild. Some days were difficult. Some conversation ended in tears. But this time, there was no more secret. One Sunday morning, Grace stood once again in church, serving with the protocol team. Daniel watched from the congregation when their eyes met. She smiled. A real smile, no longer hidden behind fear. Daniel smiled back. Pastor Samuel stepped into the pulpit. His message that morning was simple. A lie may protect you for a moment, but only the truth can truly set you free. Grace squeezed Daniel's hand. This time, neither of them let go. The end. Thank you for listening and watching this amazing story. Please do well to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification button so you can get notified anytime I drop a new story. And thanks for watching again. Bye.